Hey there YouTube fans, AC Productions here. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to do questions and answers. I know you guys are doing my installs, which I greatly appreciate. Thank you guys for subscribing to my channel and continued support. Let's get to it. So our first question comes in from Spencer Malcor. Your question is, can you explain connecting the LED controller better? Because I did it and I keep popping fuses. So you're in luck. I have my friend's Jixer here, and we're going to be doing exactly that. I'm going to be showing you a video on how to properly, and with close-ups, how to properly do the connector of the LED controller with the inline fuse. Alright, so let's get started. Okay, so these are going to be the tools that you're going to need for this particular part of the installation. We're going to need the flux for the solder, heat shrink tubing. If you don't have heat shrink tubing, we could use electrical tape, scissors, wire strippers, and a soldering gun. And then you're going to need your controller here and your LED remote. And besides that, if you happen to have these will be great for your battery terminals. That way you can just put your battery screws through that and it'll be a secure connection. You don't have to worry about it coming out because the screw will be holding it in. So if you have a few of these, it'd be recommended to get something like this. And this part would actually connect to the battery side of the controller. And another thing we're going to need is zip ties. So on the battery side of the controller, as you can see over here, you got positive and negative. You're going to be installing these eyelets into that area. Okay, now that we're on the bike over here, you want to make sure after you have all your LEDs connected on your bike, you want to make sure that you put all the negative cables together like so, and then just have them connect to one black cable like this. And then you want to do the same with your positives. You want to grab all your positives and put them all together as one. So that way you have one negative and one positive side. Now we're going to install our inline fuse. Okay, so here is our inline fuse. So what you want to do first, you want to make sure that there's no fuse in there. We want to make sure there's no power yet. Second, you want to splice some cable here. It doesn't have to be a lot. So I brought my ruler so I can show you on how much exactly to cut from the wire. So here we are in millimeters. So I would say a half a millimeter. As you can see, it's from the edge here because that's really where I'm counting from to the 0 would be half a millimeter. Grab our LED controller. We're going to go on the LED side, and we're going to do this for both of the cables. We have our ruler here, and we're going to strip off at least half a millimeter of insulation. And we're going to do this for both positive and negative. Okay, so after you strip the cables, what we're going to do is we're going to grab our paste flux. This is going to help with the soldering. So just going to open it up, and what I usually will do is just grab our cables and we're just going to dip them a few times just to get some of that flux on the cables. Once you do that, it should be like so. And also make sure that you twist the ends of your cable after splicing them. That way they're all in like a single kind of a strand. Okay, now that we've already dipped them, now we're going to go over to the bike and we are going to first go with our positive and solder that inline fuse. Okay, so here we are at an inline fuse. It's up to you if you want to dip this into the paste flux. It doesn't hurt, but if you want to, you go ahead and do so. Okay, now before we solder the connectors, you want to make sure you have your heat shrink tubing. The heat shrink tubing I'll be using is 3/16 inch, and you don't need that much. You just need enough to cover what you're soldering. So we're going to slide that in first, and we're going to slide it over to this side. You want to make sure you push it in far enough so when the heat gets applied, it doesn't shrink on the cable. Okay, so now here is our LED controller. You see, LED controller. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the side where it says LED, positive and negative. We're going to start off with the positive. So grab your positive wire from the LED side. We're going to grab our inline fuse, and then we're just going to wrap it around like so. So it should look like this once you wrap it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to solder this connection. We already have our heat shrink tubing here. Once we're done with the solder connection, we're going to slide our tubing over this connection here. Okay, now that we're done with our connection from the controller, here's a line going across with the inline fuse. This is how it should look like. And we already have our heat shrink tubing over it. Next, now we're going to go with the negative side. Also from the LED controller where it says LED. So we have our negative, and we're going to use our 1/8 inch in diameter heat shrink tubing, and we're going to put it on this side. This is all our negative LEDs right here. So we're going to slide that over as much as we can. So we're going to grab our two cables and we're just going to twist them in row like this. So we're going to put them in like that in an X, and then we're going to just wrap one over the other. So it should look like this, intertwine with each other. And just make sure that your heat shrink tubing is far away from the connector as possible, because once you heat this area, you don't want that heat shrink tubing also heat up. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to solder this, and then we're going to put our heat shrink tube over that. Okay, now that we're done with the soldering and we have our heat shrink tubing over it, so we have our negative from our LED controller on the negative side, negative, going to all the negative cables from your LEDs. And then we have our positive side running over here through our inline fuse circuit, which is right here. And then this part you wanna make sure you splice it, get all your positive LED wires together, and then intertwine them like I showed you with the negative. Since I already did this connection, sorry about that guys, did it before doing the video. So you just want to make sure you intertwine them together, solder it, put the heat shrink tubing, and then you're set. So this is how it should be connected. Alright, so this is, I'll show you from the beginning here. Okay, starting off from the controller. So on the controller, as you can see, the power, got a positive and negative. We have these installed on the connectors. So you can find something like this, should be at your automotive store. If not, I'll put a link in the description below on where I purchased these from. So we have a positive and a negative, one to each side on the positive and negative. So it goes from this side for the battery part of the controller. Then we move on to the LED part of the controller. And then we have our positive going to our inline fuse. From the inline fuse, it's going to all the positive cables of the LEDs. So all the LEDs are to one positive cable, which goes to the end one side of the inline fuse. Okay, going back to the controller, we have our negative side. Negative, we have all our negative side of our LEDs to one, which goes to the negative side of the LED portion of the controller. So now that you have everything all connected, first, before we put the fuse in, we want to make sure we connect our controller to the battery. So get our spot where it says battery, where it has the voltage. We have our two eyelets. Now we're going to disconnect the battery, and we're going to put the screw through the eyelets of the cables. Okay, so here's our battery. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do one at a time. Unless you want to do both at a time, that's up to you. But we're going to do one at a time. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect the negative first, and then put our battery through the eyelet, and then connect it back to the battery. And then we're going to go with the positive. Same thing. Take your bolt out, put it through here, and then connect it right back to the battery. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now that we got our negative battery screw out, next we're going to do is we're going to put it through the eyelet like so. So it should be like that. That way you have a good connection. It's not going to slide off any at all. So that's how it is. Now we're going to go ahead and screw this back onto the battery. Okay, so here we are. Now we have our negative connected to the battery, and it's on there securely. Just want to make sure that when you put these terminals, you want to make sure that they're all going in one direction. You don't want to have this one over here or over there. Just try to get everything in the general area going in one direction, so we have it pointed that way. So once that's tightened down, now we're going to grab our positive and do the same thing. We're going to undo the positive, screw out of the positive. We're going to put it onto the eyelet, and same thing as the other one. Now we have a good secure connection. Now we're going to go ahead and install the screw back onto the battery post. And like I said before, you just want to make sure that you have all your cables pointed in one direction if possible. Alright, so now it's nice and secure. So now just a small extra step. Since now you're not able to use your original battery boot that goes over the connector, you want to make sure you put a little bit of electrical tape. So we're going to put electrical tape on the positive, and we're going to put electrical tape on the negative, and there's no risk of a short circuit. Okay, now we've already put a little bit of electrical tape on the positive, and we also put electrical tape on the negative. This will just prevent anything coming in contact with the battery terminals and possibly causing a short circuit. Okay, so after that, we're all done with that. Now we're going to go ahead and we are going to put our fuse into our inline fuse area. Before we do that, we do have a little bit of a mess of wires. We're going to grab our zip ties and we're just going to tidy it up a little bit so it'll look a lot neater and not all over the place. So now that we have everything already zip tied, I'll make sure it looks pretty tidy in this area. Okay, so now that we have everything all together, now we want to put in our fuse. Now the fuse we're going to use is going to be a 15 amp fuse, as you can see. Generally here in the US it's a blue color fuse, but it could be a different color in your city, state, or country. But just make sure it's a 15 amp fuse. So it's going to go ahead and we're going to put that into our inline fuse holder. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead, put that in. Now that it's in, now we're just going to put our protective dust cover over the fuse. And make sure that you have the controller towards the side of the bike, that way you get best reception when you're using your remote for your LEDs. Alright, and we're just going to tuck everything there. Now the last thing we need to do is just put your bike back together. And then we're going to test out the LEDs. Okay, now that we have our bike back together, now we have our remote. And now we're going to test out the LEDs. So you just power it on. As you can see, the lights are on over there. And then you have your different settings. You have your light, your brightness. If you want instant, you got 100%, 50, and 25. And then you have your different modes and your speeds. You can control it from the remote. We're not going to go through all that at the moment. It's still daylight, so I'm trying to do the best I can to show you the lights that work. So if we were to select the mode, press the mode, you could see it's cycling to like a flashing mode. And then you could select it if you wanted to go faster or slower. That's up to you. Once you're done, you could put it back on light. If you don't want the flashing, you want just a regular steady light, just press light and it goes back to the default setting. Alright, well hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, and you found another person that may need this installation video, please share the video. They might also need help in wiring up their controller. If you have any questions or comments, or if you're also having a difficult time with one of my installations, maybe something wasn't too clear, or maybe you just need a little bit more detail on a specific spot on an installation, please let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching.